All right, let's dive right in. For almost 500 years, there was one name in the ancient Near East that made everyone's blood run cold: Assyria. And this wasn't just any old empire. It was built and it was held together by what was probably the most efficient, the most technologically advanced, and the most utterly ruthless military force the world had ever seen. So today, we're going to break down what made the Assyrian army the absolute terror of the ancient world.
Chilling, right? And this wasn't some boast from an epic poem or work of fiction. No, this was an official record, something they proudly carved into stone for everyone to see. This was basically a statement of policy from the rulers of Assyria, a brutal, graphic warning that if you resisted, you'd be met with a kind of cruelty you couldn't even imagine. It was psychological warfare, and they had perfected it.
So, how did they get this fearsome reputation? I mean, what was their secret? Well, it wasn't just about being brutal. The Assyrians totally changed the game. They revolutionized the very idea of warfare through incredible organization, new technology, and a warrior culture that actually celebrated a heroic death. To really get a handle on their reign, you have to understand their army. Okay, so the whole story really kicks off with this massive transformation, and it was all engineered by one king, Tiglath-Pileser III, back in the mid-8th century BCE. See, before him, armies were, a temporary thing, just a bunch of farmers called up to fight in between planting season and the harvest. He changed absolutely everything. And this slide right here just lays it all out. On the one hand, you've got the old way: seasonal fighting, part-time farmer soldiers, and bronze weapons. But the Assyrian Revolution, that meant year-round warfare with full-time professional soldiers armed with a newer, much stronger metal: iron. This was it. This was the world's first true professional military. And just think about what that really means for a second. The war never had to stop for the harvest. So while all their enemies were back home tending their fields, the Assyrian war machine could be on the march in the dead of winter or the heat of summer. It gave them this massive, relentless advantage over every single one of their neighbors. So you've got this incredible professional army, right? But what really made them almost unbeatable was their gear. It was state of the art. The Assyrians were really the first fully tap into the power of a whole new technological age. I mean, just look at this arsenal. It shows you how far ahead of the curve they were. First off, they were the Iron Army, and iron was just better than bronze in every way: harder, cheaper, and it held a much sharper edge. Their soldiers were decked out in iron-scaled armor and carried these powerful composite bows that could outrange pretty much anything their enemies had. And get this, even their boots were a piece of military tech, with hobnails for grip, designed for marching and fighting on any terrain. Okay, so having the best gear is one thing, but the Assyrians, they wrote the playbook on how to use it, especially when it came to the fortified cities all over the Near East. They became the undisputed, terrifying masters of the siege. And when they laid siege to a city, it wasn't just some chaotic mob attack. Oh no. This was a science, a precise engineered process of total destruction. They had a dedicated corps of military engineers who would build these enormous ramps right up to the enemy walls. Then, under a constant hail of arrows, they'd roll up massive multi-story siege towers and battering rams. It was a relentless, unstoppable system, and they applied it with just brutal efficiency. And you have to understand this. The terror, the cruelty, that wasn't just a side effect of the war. It was a central tool they used to control their empire. After they conquered a city, they would deport huge chunks of the population, moving skilled people around wherever the empire needed them. And the graphic punishments, they were put on public display to make damn sure nobody else would even think about resisting. It was a cold, hard calculation. Ruling through sheer terror was way more cost-effective than leaving a garrison in every single city. So what drove these guys? What made them fight with this incredible ferocity? It wasn't just discipline, and it wasn't just fear of their own commanders. It was something way deeper, a belief that was baked into their very culture. Well, in their culture, dying bravely in battle was the ultimate honor. It was seen as a pathway to a kind of immortality, to achieving eternal fame. And this idea drove everybody, from the lowest foot soldier all the way up to the king himself. One of their greatest kings, Sargon II, didn't just send his men to die. He personally led the charge and was killed in combat, living by the exact code he demanded of his soldiers. And nothing, I mean nothing, captures this warrior mindset better than this one quote. It's from a commander's letter to the king.
A small group of just 150 Assyrian soldiers were ambushed and totally outnumbered. And before they charged into a hopeless battle, this is what they proclaimed. They weren't afraid of dying. They were terrified of being forgotten.
So you build this incredible, terrifying empire. Where does that road end? Well, for the Assyrians, their legacy is this fascinating and honestly brutal paradox. The very things that made them so powerful also planted the seeds of their own destruction.
Because in the end, it turns out you can only rule through fear for so long. The Assyrians were hated, universally, and their extreme brutality just fueled one rebellion after another, which constantly drained their resources. Eventually, a massive coalition of their enemies, the Babylonians, the Medes, and the Persians, rose up and brought the entire empire crashing down, burning its great cities to the ground. But here's the thing, the empire was gone, but their ideas, they were here to stay. They basically created the blueprint for warfare that would be copied and fine-tuned for centuries to come. The whole idea of a professional, standing army, the engineering corps, the advanced siege tactics, using terror as a policy, this model of building an empire would be adopted by so many who followed, most famously, of course, by the Romans. And that kind of leaves us with this big question, doesn't it? The Assyrians were brilliant innovators, no doubt about it. They forged the world's first true military empire. But their legacy is forever stained by the terror they used to build it. They mastered the art of conquest, for sure, but their story is also this timeless and frankly terrifying reminder of the brutal human cost of that mastery.